Well, welcome to Gafferpedia. And today we have Clint Tregellas from Myles AV, all the way from, Queensland, yes.
Sort of,
In between.
A lot of the time.
A lot of the time. Those who've listened to Dino's episode will know that you are co-founders or partners in Myles AV. And today's topic, we're talking about the golden rules, the magic numbers, the rules of thumb of AV in the AV business, but in particular about assets, CapEx, buying stuff, the usual. How many hires do I have to do to pay for it? How do I choose the rate? Those sorts of things. But before we get into that, let's just have a little catch up on Clint.
Yeah, sure. Yep, a little bit of an intro on me and where I've come from.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Always wanted to ask.
Yep.
Who is Myles?
So the name actually comes from my mum's side of the family.
Okay.
So it's Myles is their surname.
Uh-huh.
And actually, the idea for the business started off, it was actually originally called Myles Productions when I started it back in 2001.
Okay.
And the idea was actually to work in the theater and production side of things. So my cousin's a film editor. Both my uncles are actors and directors. Worked in Melbourne Theatre Company. My cousins worked on some big films like Island of Dr. Moreau and Moulin Rouge and things like that. So the family had a big connection with that side of the industry, and that was my thought that I would go into that. I trained in Canada as an audiovisual technician.
Okay.
And when I came out to Australia, I got a job working for one of the bigger companies in Melbourne here for a while. And when I decided to leave there, I thought, well, I'll start this production company, not knowing what I was going to do with it yet.
Right.
And so I bought a projector and I bought a PA system. I thought, I'll just hire those out
And here we go.
Figuring out what I'm going to do with my life and what the company's going to be and how we're going to do this production company. Within a very short period of time, I had a warehouse full of gear and, was renting out equipment, and the production dropped off and it became Myles.
I guess I'm in this business.
Yeah, it kind of ended up there. Exactly right. Yeah. So I had done a few years in the industry, so I knew it reasonably well, but didn't actually intend on building the company the way it sort of has become. So that's how it started back in 2001.
And you've got an office and outpost in the Gold Coast and in Sydney.
Yep.
And obviously Dino in Melbourne.
Yep.
And you live, you part-time live up there.
In the Gold Coast, yep.
Nice.
Yep. So I'm back and forth between Melbourne and Gold Coast. So, so I don't have a lot to do with Melbourne and Sydney anymore. I did in the early days.
Yeah.
I have a lot less now. So, but I'm sort of around to give the guys a hand with anything they need in those businesses. And then I'm more involved with Gold Coast. I don't have a partner in the Gold Coast, so that's solely my business. So,
yes.
I have Matt Prescott, who's up there, and he's managing that business with me, and he's good value, but not a partner.
Yeah.
So
very good.
Yep.
So you've bought lots of gear.
Yep.
I've bought lots of gear, and my role is inventory manager at staging, and then on my own businesses. And John, you're just sort of starting your journey.
Yeah, bought some gear, but it was one thing I wanted to sort of talk about was someone from my background where was freelancing for a while, and then you're interested in starting business, so you buy a few things and you try to offer a few more things. But then it seems like there comes this point where it's like, what comes first? You want to get to that next point. But in order to get to that next point, you need maybe people or more gear and all this sort of thing. But you're also not at that point yet. So it's kind of like, that's a big investment. There's no guarantees. It's like, I don't know where this question's going, but I guess, do you know that point that I'm talking? It's kind of like like you're either going to go for it or you're not. There's this point where you kind of can creep up onto it for a certain amount of time, but at some point you've got to say, I'm making a crack at this, or it's hard to break through. Yes. Did you have a point like that?
Yeah, what was your impetus? Well, you said basically you went out, you had a client, obviously. Who said,
so I had a client who basically needed a PA and a projector at the time, and rented that out, and then sort of word of mouth. Of course, I was in the industry for a little while, so I was able to get a few more jobs off that. And of course, then you end up with a situation where two people need the same thing on the one day.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you run into that scenario. So
that's right. The impetus to buy, and that's really what we're talking about, that sort of that trigger point.
Yep.
I mean, you can hire or you can buy it.
Yep.
Or you can make do. But if you can't bounce it hard from job A to job B overnight or whatever, you get to that point where you've either got to hire something or you've got to buy it.
Yeah, for us, it was very much a lot of hiring. The early days just didn't have the capital to spend in the early days, so hired a lot of gear. That I would say the first full year in business, I probably had a higher cross-hire bill than we have now. Like it was massive. So
well, that's
which is
how you have to start.
What we had to do to start, and then starting to realize, okay, we're hiring this piece of equipment, once every week or once twice a week now. This one needs to be bought. So that's how the sort of priority, I guess, for what's the next thing we buy when we were on a fairly tight budget. What's the next piece of equipment? Well, a lot of it was sort of deemed by demand for us. So, and as soon as I saw that we were renting that out a lot, I would go out and purchase it.
Yeah. And so did you keep track of those numbers?
We did keep track. So we were fortunate enough to have a computer program in the early days that was able to track inventory to some degree. Compared to what they do now, wasn't probably that great, but at the time it certainly worked well enough to just basically there was a revenue number next to it. So I could run that report, see how much revenue for that period, and go, this is ridiculous. We're spending this much on cross-hire. We've got to get more of this or that or whatever. So.
That's a really good point. I think for someone like with me in my business, I'm often a lot more service-based than individual hire-based. But then that makes it hard not tracking that kind of stuff. When you do want to make an investment, it's like, what do you base that on? You're just trying to use your memory and all this kind of stuff.
And gut feeling and instinct.
But it's pretty important to keep track of all that stuff, right?
Track, and it's obviously sometimes it's quite shocking what things are bringing in versus what you're spending on them, and you don't realize it, because your mind doesn't remember as well as it does.
I'm quite dispassionate about it, I suppose, and these are just commodities now. But if you're into toys and you can have a certain, thing that you like.
Yeah, that's my problem.
But often the numbers don't stack up against what you might think is a good buy. Because you start looking through it and realize it's the very boring things that actually.
Well, and so we had a scenario once. One of the guys who worked with me went to one of the big companies and did a bit of a tour of the warehouse and wanted to see what they were all about. And he came back to the office and he said, I've finally seen the difference. He said they've got, and he rambled off different Christie projectors and all these different things. And he's going, all the toys that everybody wants to play with. And he said they were all on the shelves. I could look at them all. I could see them. He goes, I came back to the office. There's no flip charts. There's no whiteboards. There's no basic PAs. There's no radio mics. Because all of that stuff is out all the time. That's the stuff we continually reinvested into.
There is I guess a weird kind of thing though between seen as being credible and seen as being up contemporary and having state-of-the-art stuff. So people wanting to buy things that are marketable and so, wow, look at me, versus the things that you don't want to talk about, like flip charts and things that no one cares about. But they are the sort of thing that makes you money.
They do. They rent out a lot. The return on investment in them is great. So that's why we spent the money on them. We also, we made sure that we had Sennheiser radio mics or Shure, we didn't buy cheap stuff for those more expensive items. But we knew that there was a lot of money in those, a lot of return on those, some of those non-sexy items. Sorry, John, but
no, exactly.
The new cameras, the new vision mixers, they just
and that's the thing. It's like the problem when it's kind of a little bit your hobby as well. Is like you start thinking about what you want, and then it's like, okay, let me build a business case around that. Which is I've been guilty of in the past, and rather than looking at the business and saying what does the business need and how's it going to get us where we're going, it's kind of like the backwards way of looking at it the other way.
That's right. And I think I've always been more of the numbers person. I think even Dino mentioned that on his podcast that there's other guys in the industry who have that real passion for the gear and for the shows and all that stuff, and I do. But I can sort of step away from that, look at the numbers, and just go, this doesn't make sense financially. And I think that's why we've been able to build a pretty solid business across the 3 states. It's just having a bit of a really good, solid financial.
So at least if you are that way inclined, just finding a way to compartmentalize that and go, okay, I'm putting on my accountant hat now.
Well, the numbers are really helpful. So coming from big AV, it was all spreadsheets. We had to do board reports and we had to CapEx committees and all sorts
another
of
level.
But it is, when you start getting into that level, you start realising it is all about the numbers and not about the toy. So, and it comes down to, there's a couple of reasons, isn't it? I mean, it has to be marketable, but it also has to be, there's a cost in cross-hiring. You've got to go pick it up, you've got to return it.
Yeah, logistics a big part of it as well.
Yeah, for sure.
How far away is that supplier? What's the quality of the stuff that I'm getting from that supplier? Sorry.
The watch strikes again.
Why does that happen? So, there's all that sort of thing that has to come into it. We often I've bought things in the past based on the fact that the supplier is like 25 kilometres away, and
Yeah, so from a monetary point, it doesn't necessarily make sense, except that it's taking you 2 hours out of your day to organise getting it there and back at a particular time, I guess.
Well, this example is a drape, but our local drape supplier is Footscray, which is miles away from here. And they're an awesome company, but it's a long way to go get 2 or 4 drapes.
Yep.
So you get a whole bunch of them, sure, get them to deliver it, set it up on site, awesome. But you just need 2 either side of the screen. It's a long way to go. And you've got to do the reverse 2 days later when you return it.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a funny thing. I remember asking someone what their the best return on investment out of all the equipment they have. And they're like, DI boxes.
Yeah.
Because they're like, they cost like $100 and we put them on for $40 a gig. And it's like, it's those weird things that you don't really think about. It's like, that's actually returned the most money.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. So let's talk about that. There's a couple of things going on there, isn't there? I mean, how much you charge for something based on what it costs you to buy and how you determine that, but also its lifespan.
Yep.
Some things go out of date really quickly. Some things have battery lives that don't last. So some things have to be 10% or 10 times, so you can get your money back reasonably quickly. Other things are probably more on average 3 to 5% of its purchase price, or 20 highs, or 25 highs, or even 30 highs. But if it's going to last for a long time, that's okay. But no one ever factors in the cost of the road case often. So,
and sometimes that can cost more than what you put in it.
Correct.
But
and not all the other things that comes with it. If you're buying a TV, you got to put big city back rails on the. There's other costs.
Yeah, exactly. So we kind of, we always used to talk about that 10 hires to get your money back. And that was sort of a real.
Well, that was an old rule of thumb, but that's a
rule of thumb. It doesn't work for everything, obviously.
Funny things like radio mics, for instance, are kind of set by a market force.
Correct.
And have that price has been there for a long time. Leg turns, but these things keep going up.
Yep.
But the market force price of a radio
rental
mic
is
changed.
Correct. Yeah. So you're having to get a lot more, which you do. I mean, they're a good item in that they rent a lot. So the return's always been quite good for those.
Yeah.
As you said, DIs are definitely up there on our list. They're definitely be on our top list, as far as a percentage goes, return. And things like vision mixers and cameras, and that might take a lot longer.
Yeah.
As you said, the 20, 25 hires to get your money back.
Yeah.
And going back to I would look at it and say, well, we're hiring once a month, so it's going to take 2 years to get our money back, but it's probably worth that investment to have it to save all the cross hiring, labor and transport and all that sort of stuff. So once we got to that sort of point where it's once a month we're using something like that, I would get it in. Whether it takes a year or 2 years to get it back, depending on how much you use it. The other thing I find with equipment is we tend to sell what we've got.
Yes.
So, for example, I was talking to Dino the other day, and we have catch boxes up in Gold Coast that we use regularly for events.
Yep.
And we use them regularly because we have them. Whereas
That's right.
Dino doesn't have them in Melbourne, so he doesn't
sell them.
So if you do put that investment, I remember when we bought our first video camera, and it was a big purchase for us at the time, and it was something that we weren't hiring really regularly at that point. And it went out a lot more as soon as we got it, because we had it there and we were able to offer it as
That's an interesting topic, though, isn't it? Because there's things that you need skills to use as opposed to things you use every day.
Yep.
So often when you buy something like a camera, the argument is, well, I don't have a cameraman to go with it.
Yep.
But there's a difference between a lock-off at the back versus a full roaming around the room sort of situation.
Yeah. And we were using it for pretty much a live-to-screen, very basic lectern-to-screen kind of shot.
Yeah.
And that was part of it as well. As part of the decision was that we were hiring in a cameraman and camera at I don't know what it was at the time, called $1,000 a day, and going, hold on, he's literally standing there and pushing on. Like, this isn't a technical record of any sort of.
But there are more complicated jobs.
Absolutely.
And fallback for bands is another. Always been that one. You know, sometimes there's just a couple of sends and it's really easy. It's a corporate cover band, simple. But then sometimes they're really complicated and you need a skilled monitors guy.
And we, I mean, where we sit in the industry, we're always sort of aware of not buying certain pieces of equipment that are too far beyond what we're capable of. We're happy to get in the high-end PA system with the operator or the lighting system or whatever it is for the larger shows. Where
I guess used to be a conflict was that because we own it, we're going to keep selling our camera, and then you're going past your capacity to do that service. Like your camera might have been great for lock-off shot, but not for something else. Yep. So now you're bringing in a guy and his camera, but your camera's still sitting there, and that's always the.
It's hard to do sometimes, but I can do it. I'm comfortable doing it because I know there is a limit to what we can do with
and
that
you've got to deliver
and
the best for your customer.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because we don't want at the end of the day, you know, to have an issue with the end result. So
if you've got to credit the whole show, there was no point.
There's no point trying to save a couple $100 and just have your camera.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear you say that there is that moment where you say you're not sure whether that bit of gear is going to go out a lot, but then as soon as you had it, it started going out a lot more. And I see that as well as like there's one school of thought will say for like a new camera, say for someone in video production, I'll wait until I have jobs that demand that before I invest in that. But then
you may never get them.
Yeah, exactly. And because you don't have it, it's hard to try and secure that sort of thing. So that's something I've been working with lately, where it's like I'm going to step in and make that big purchase or that big decision, kind of in the hope, but I guess kind of like an educated guess, basically, that it will get that ROI, but you can never, I guess, guarantee it.
No, you got to take a punt.
Yeah. At what point do you sort of roll the dice? And what point do you need to know that it's going to return, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, that's why pretty much everything that we invested large amounts of money in, we were hiring from someone before that.
Yeah.
There wouldn't have been anything that we just went, oh, we're going to have that. And we've never had that before, you know, and give it a go and see if it rents. We wouldn't do that. So we're sort of trialing the market first.
Yeah. It is the safest way.
Yeah,
it's the way to
definitely.
do it. Yeah. And ultimately, if you're doing a big corporate conference and you need a couple of big kick-ass projectors and you can rent them in and you kind of prove it, you can do the whole shebang. You've got to prove that asset. But it might have to be once a year, and it's probably damn good not to have bought them.
Who wants, $60,000 projectors sitting in your inventory that go out once a year, not me.
Yeah.
So, and there's companies that rent them out regularly and then hire them to all us, smaller guys, and that sort of works for everybody.
Yeah.
So,
because again, it's not just the projector. And we're going to need a whole range of lenses, and we're going to need all the
stuff. Definitely. Yep. Yeah. And just even all the cables that connect it all together. Like there's that. It's like it's a system. It's not like a piece of gear, is it? So you've got to go right into that whole system.
Yep.
What about stuff that often goes out for no charge? Decimators, even DIs, even though God love them and they make us a lot of money, but often they don't always charge for.
Yep.
Or even laptops. Client says I only need 2, but you take 4.
Yeah, I just need an extra one of these, and they just expect it to be thrown in, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's always
it's a bit of a balance, to keeping that client happy and making sure you do get a return on that investment. So, I mean, you can only do so much of that before you're going to go out of business. So
well, that's right. Exactly.
They're going to have to pay for as much as possible. But is it worth, pushing a relationship over a single laptop hire on a big job? No. You just got to sort of weigh it up. That's a bit of a gut.
I think that's partly why we have to charge, $150 a day or whatever it is. And that laptop isn't, that expensive.
No.
But it has a short life. It has a battery. It's not going to last forever. They do get knocked off. They do go out of date. And then there's a whole bunch of unrecoverable charges.
Absolutely, there are. Yep, and they get used around the office for bits and pieces and stuff. So Yep.
So we've been talking about gear, but also with like staff and people and that kind of thing. Like often when people are starting out in business, they'll end up doing everything themselves and sort of wearing a lot of hats and all that sort of thing. And again, with that whole chicken or the egg thing, like when are you going to dive in? That point where you think, I need to get someone else on, even if I can't necessarily justify it monetarily now to get where I need to go, I'm going to need that other person to be able to grow.
Yeah.
Like, what are the kind of like the trigger points where you think we need more people and that kind of thing?
So I guess for me, that was, so from day one, I don't know why I chose to do this, but I never operated an event. I just didn't.
I remember in the past you saying, I don't want to operate.
I just didn't like doing it, which, owning the company, I had that choice. I didn't have to. So I'd done a lot of it before that.
I was the same.
Yeah, so I just sort of said, I'm locked up for too long, can't answer the phone, can't do emails, so I'll get this subcontractor in to do that operate. Yeah. And over time, it just became that, they would work 2 days a week, and then it's 3, and then it's 4. And all of a sudden, you're basically employing somebody. And again, it comes down to numbers. So I would look at my subcontractor costs, and over the course of a month, if I'm spending, 150% of a full-time wage, then I know that I need to put on a full-timer. So you'd know that, 100% of a full-time wage isn't right, because you're going to need 2 people on this day and 3 on this day. But as soon as you start getting up to around that, it was around 150% of a full-time wage. I would say, hold on, maybe another person. So, and I would sit down the end of the year as well and look at the P&Ls and look at the subcontractor costs versus my wages. And I would say, okay, well, we definitely need 1 more person at least, or 2 more people this year coming up.
And so by not weighing yourself down by your time being taken up being on one job, obviously that allows you to also sort of run the rest of the company, but did you put a lot of that time into sort of business development and reaching out, trying to
for
get
sure.
new clients?
Especially in the early days, that's all it was. So it's just trying to get around and see people that I knew in the industry, drop into hotels and venues and say hello and wherever I could. It's still a reasonable part of what I do today. So I don't have anybody who does business development for the business. I usually do most of it. So I didn't really, there wasn't really a method for it. It just sort of something I had to do. I guess if I had spare time, I was doing that, because really I need to grow the business to the next level. I was always looking ahead to that.
And it's just reaching out, making connections, that kind of thing?
Reaching out, making connections. It's, 7 years now doing this. So, you sort of meet a lot of people along the way, and if they've worked with you before, they're usually happy to have a chat and just see where they're at.
And they do move around.
They move around a lot. Absolutely. So
it's amazing who you run into. So with venues particularly, but we used to always have a general rule of thumb that every 200,000, this is, rates change obviously, so percentage is probably better to talk than dollars, but around every sort of $200,000 was a crew member. Tech. So it sort of depended a little bit, I guess. So we had a venue that did just under that $200,000 mark. They wanted a full-time person. We wouldn't touch a venue if it didn't do 250.
That was sort of the idea. And then you kind of like, oh, could we do it? Maybe we could get them doing some other bits and pieces from site. But then they wanted a $400,000 install.
Oh, okay.
And we politely pulled out of that tender. We had that contract for 8 years, and that was January 2020 that we pulled out. So I'm glad we did.
Right.
In hindsight, that was a bit of luck there. And the company that took them on, they obviously would have had to have worn that cost for a long period of time. So
definitely.
I mean, 200,000 isn't really enough anymore.
Not now. Not with the current rates of labor.
I don't know what you're paying. Depends on your cities. I mean, Sydney's crazy. You're probably somewhere between 80 and 150 grand a year for a venue manager these days, depending on the size of the venue. You can't even think about 200,000. So, but where's that point where you say, we'll put this person in, or how many people do you put in? And
we used to always struggle with this, what we used to call donut days, but it's all at the start, and all at the end, but nothing in the middle. So it's kind of hard to cover that time span as well.
We look after like the Intercontinentals in Sydney. I know I've talked to Brock multiple times about this, because it's part of it, part of that scheduling drives him crazy, because that's exactly what it is. You need somebody there every morning, you need someone there every night. You've usually got a manager there during the day, but you're trying to keep them off the floor. So it's tricky.
It is.
The venues are tricky.
They are. And when you're to a certain size and you can share and you can start looking at scheduling and say, guy in the morning and then another guy in the afternoon, but he can use, you know, you can share him around and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But when you're smaller, that's
something I find really hard. Like, if you've got a sort of a bigger business around the city where you've got multiple drop-offs throughout the day, getting someone in for 2 hours to pack up a gig is just one part of their day. But if you're sort of a smaller operator and you've got this gig and you don't need people all the time, but you need people there to pack up, and the client's used to paying 3 hours for someone to be there, but it's like you can't hire someone in for 3 hours because they're not going to come. So that's just
that's why I used to do a lot of that stuff myself, because you just couldn't get
and that's what I did as well. I mean, I hate to say it now, but we used to not charge delivery collection or you know, there was no fee. So, or set up back down labor. I just did it all for free. Which is crazy.
Just to get
you can't
in
just do it. And we had really good volume back in those days, so it was different back then. I mean, you were just hiring flip charts and whiteboards and little projectors, and you know, it was drop off quick in and out. You could do. I mean, you'd remember some of those days back, you know, with 15 or 20 drop-offs and pickups. Your run. So
so on any one of those, you know,
doing any one of those individually is very difficult to charge for and pay for people and things like that.
The economy of scale.
The economy of scale definitely helps with that sort of stuff. But these days tends to be higher value jobs. And obviously, you know, you can sort of work in all those costs in each.
But it seems like, so you kind of filled that point of when you didn't have that volume to when you did do a lot. I'm going to do a lot of extra work myself to get us to that point where we can get to the
next person that you can afford to hire. And then, I mean, I was on the road for the first 10 years. I mean, and that was because we would get somebody and then I'd build it up a bit more, and then we'd get to that next level where we could afford the next person.
Well, that's right. So even talking about my original 200,000 or whatever, you know, there's a point where you go from 450 to 650. You're killing one guy to prove that it's worth hiring another guy, or you're getting someone in for half a day, or you know. But you got to do extra peddling before you can get someone else in.
Yeah, that's right.
Which can cause burnout and. Yeah,
that's right. You got to try and look after the guys, but at the same time, you just sort of don't want them sitting around, obviously. And they don't want to be either. I mean, they're always happier to be out working, and
definitely
they want a bit of pace in the game. Keeps them a bit more interested. So.
No, it's true. It's nothing worse than just doing nothing.
No, and unfortunately, we have a bit of that in our game, waiting around for events to finish and start and all that sort of stuff.
And that's getting the problem with that sort of donut sort of stuff.
Over that Christmas period and everything, where it's just
well, that's
everyone's quiet.
Managing those holiday periods as well is always difficult. And I mean, I was always pretty fixed on having holidays during those school holiday periods. And we try to stick to that as much as possible now as well. I mean, there's always, you know, things that come up outside of that. But if the majority of people take their holidays during those periods, sort of works okay. For everybody. And look, people are happy to usually be off in December, January. It's a nice time of year to take a holiday. So usually works out pretty well.
Definitely. Well, there's nothing. They don't want to be in doing nothing.
No. That's right. Drags on.
It does. And then you get these fruitless tasks people try to create, but you know.
That's right. You know. Here's our task board for the month of January that we've all had and done. Which, you know, look, some of that stuff has to get done.
Yes.
Good time to get maintenance and bits and pieces done, but
no one particularly likes.
No, you don't want to be stuck on that.
Cleaning tape off speaker stands or whatever.
Cleaning screens and tagging leads.
That's right. Everybody's done it, but nobody wants to do it.
Indeed. So, but with labour, it's always a bit of a matter of I guess of opinion, but how much to charge? You know, it's very much market forces, but it's not the same ROI as gear.
No,
you can't put the same metrics on it.
Nowhere near. No.
And there's so many unrecoverable hours.
Yeah, trying to justify the time in the warehouse picking the gear and packing and prepping, and then obviously the driving and I mean, we try with contractors to have them start at site as much as possible, just to keep those costs down, because they're usually your highest labor cost, obviously, per hour. We've been trying to sort of push that rate a little bit in the last couple of years, because certainly coming out of COVID, it's been more expensive.
Yes.
No question. And it's getting people to, you know, accept that the rates are going up. It can be difficult, but it's getting there. And I guess you're probably the same, follow the bigger companies. They tend to be the first to move, because as you said, they work off spreadsheets and they just don't accept that
they're losing
there's
money
not
anyway.
a percentage as they had last year. Why am I not getting the same return? So that goes up. and we tend to follow that, maybe slightly behind them, but we're just sort of creeping up behind them. So
Another hard thing is that pre-production time as well. Like if it's obviously a very basic gig that you do all the time, it's just about scheduling it in. But sometimes you get those clients that want something a bit different, and it takes a bit of headspace, and they're probably maybe not used to, with other jobs they've done, they're not used to paying for that pre-production time. But a lot of the time it has to get done. And I guess, how do you go with that side of things?
COVID was good for that because we were doing the online thing. Yeah. They had to understand that, well, what they're doing in the office is actually, there's a lot involved. And it's like a lot of this gets done, for your regular in-person events. You just don't see it.
Don't realize.
And now they sort of maybe appreciated that there was some work going on beforehand. So we've been able to keep that in place coming out of COVID. So to keep more of a pre-production. We're doing a lot more pre-production charging, I guess.
Yeah, cool.
And for those bigger jobs. And because those jobs seem to be getting bigger in general, then we're getting more of that.
Yeah.
And hopefully, in the old days, there was a bit of a issue of people not wanting to charge for. Well, a rehearsal would say, a show where the breakout room would start at midday, and they wouldn't want to pay for the guy until midday. But he's actually there at 10. I mean, he's got to warm up. We've got to reset the room. He's got to get his head around it, and then the breakout room starts.
It's that classic thing. But the thing's only an hour. It's like, but we're still. So they want the whole thing to be cheaper, but we're still setting up the same amount of equipment we would for a whole day, and all those other factors.
Still there for longer than an hour. You have to pay minimums and all that sort of stuff.
Just because you only are doing something in there for an hour doesn't really shrink everything, I guess. Yeah.
We do a lot of package pricing now to get around that. So because we found that was the case as well, where people were like picking little things out of and going 2 hours here or this little piece of equipment so we've been doing a lot more packaging of stuff to try to avoid that. So
not line iteming.
So not line iteming a lot of stuff. We're just putting it together. So it's an audio package, or it's a full day delegate conference package with all this audio and vision and in person and blah blah blah. It's all included. Yeah, it's all listed, but there's just a price at the bottom.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, I definitely like that way of doing things as well. Because I remember when I first started in sort of video production, and I'd get somewhere and they'd say, "Oh, we need to cut costs. We don't need the light, or we don't need that light. Just give us 2 lights instead of 3." It's like, it's not.
You need 3. Come on.
It's like you're doing all this already.
Yeah, you don't want to pull it apart.
And in-house AV companies often do.
Yeah, and that's how it started. So we didn't used to do that, and then we took over a couple of hotels that were fairly decent size. So they had package pricing already in place. Yeah. So we inherited that, and we looked at the package pricing and thought, geez, it's actually quite good. Yeah. Hey, it's quite good what's included because it sort of covers the bulk of what most people need. Yeah. But it's good for us as well, just to have that same package to work off of. Yeah. And then you fine tune it and add to it and as you need to.
As long as people accept it.
But and that was the thing. They loved it. And the venue, from the venue perspective, they loved it because it meant that they had a package price to offer. Yep. So they could say, rather than it's like, oh, you want this and that, and we're not quite sure if you know.
So they could almost quote it.
They could pretty much quote things, although we try and stay away from that as much as possible.
But they've got a basic
they have an idea, that you walk into that ballroom, that's about what it's going to cost you.
But that's good for the end customer, assuming that the end customer is not a production company or another AV company. That's when.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so when they, so and so presenters just rocked in and they actually want a headset mic. That's okay. We have, we've got 4 headsets, 4 handhelds, 4 lapels in our kit. Yeah. So whatever you want, it doesn't matter. It's sort of here. And as you said, laptops that you're not charging for, well, we've got 3 in our kit. Yeah. That's just part of what you get with that package. So and we've all done it enough times to know what are those last minute things that people come in and say, could I just get this? Yeah. So it's already included as much as possible.
And then you don't have to have that conversation or that argument in the moment.
No, that's right. It's an extra $400. Yeah. What do you mean?
I need to get that approved and blah blah blah.
All that sort of stuff, or I have to get it from that office, or it's just here and it's ready to go. So no, they usually appreciate that. So and that's also from a lot of talk with techs. We found that over the years, it's funny what little things technicians can want, and once you get off the road a little bit, you do the same. You sort of maybe don't realize that there's little bits and pieces that they can have in their little, kit that actually can get them out of trouble and, just make life easier sometimes. Like a Bluetooth DI box is a really handy thing to have.
Yeah.
Just to put some background music, somebody can just
Yep.
hook up to it and away they go. So to have one of those in your audio kit is just handy. So.
Yeah. So do you sort of rack things up a lot more now rather than
A lot more.
being all
Yeah.
these separate? It used to be very much let's keep everything as a separate component so
Yeah.
we can fine tune each job.
Yeah, and I think that was a necessity in the early days. Because
Well, it's utilisation of assets.
Yeah, things
Yeah,
were
yeah.
just going everywhere,
Yeah.
and it also meant that we didn't have to bring back things for them to go out. They could, we just get take 2 mics from there and go to the next job.
yeah, yeah.
As I said, those runs where you're going 10, 12 places.
Yeah.
Whereas now, bigger jobs, we're just finding that rack stuff is really good. So an audio kit is just an audio kit. We sell it as a kit. As I said, nothing's priced per item. It's all just in the box, and it literally rolls into the van in the box.
And that cuts down on labour so much, I'd imagine, as well.
Yeah, it's good.
But it does reduce your utilisation, though, does it?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty careful about what goes in those kits. And we still have, obviously, bits and pieces of extras that we can add on to that. So I don't put 8 mics in a kit because 90% of our gigs are 4 mics or less.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
it's all just looking at the numbers
Yeah.
and seeing that that's sort of your max 90% of the time, then that's what you go with. So, I mean, I've had the guys have constantly hitting me up saying, you've got 4 handhelds, 4 lapels in this kit, but we only have 4 receivers. Why not put an extra 4 receivers? And I'm like, well, then we end up in this scenario where,
Yes.
90% of the time, it's
Well, you
not
probably
being
can't
used.
charge anymore for that kit.
And we're not charging anymore for that kit,
And
correct?
then you want to spend another $4,000, thanks.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it's
Sounds easy.
yeah. So it's that sweet spot, I guess, because sometimes
Yeah.
it'll go out to a gig, then you need 1 radio mic and you've got 4 there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But as you said, you look at the numbers,
Yeah.
you've averaged it out. It's just the amount of time it saves just having it all there.
As much as we can have it in there, but it's not going to cover every gig. If it covers every gig, you've probably spent too much.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way of
So-
looking at it, actually.
And
Well, that's the same with labour, though. If you
Yeah.
never have to hire anyone or you never have to cross-hire
You've got too many
anything,
people.
You've got too many people and too,
too
much
much
gear.
gear. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not supposed to cover the peak.
No, absolutely
Yeah, yeah.
not. Yeah. So, but if you're running around in January cross-hiring things, then you got a problem.
You've done exactly. That's right. You should be able to sit in that nice suite.
Well, there you go. That's
Yeah,
another
yeah.
good, one of the things you were saying you wanted to cover today, those rule of thumbs.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that sounds like a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, for me, the guys who are on the road doing the work, the technicians now, if they're 100% happy with it, it's probably too much gear.
Yes.
They're always asking for stuff, which is great. I encourage it. We have a list going at all times, wish list. And some of the things I like about this wish list is sometimes it's a $200 item they really want for whatever reason. It's going to make their life easier. I just get it.
Yeah.
Whereas that, they want 4 extra radio kits that are, $4,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
that can go on the list, but probably one of those things
No.
that will never occur. So
Yeah.
So, Big AV looks at it lots of different ways, but they have to, they got to factor in what's marketable, what's a good marketing story. Look at us. This is what we need to do to be contemporary, or spend our money well, and look at us and we can advertise it, as opposed to buying boring things. But yes, if you ask the crew, they'll want, I don't know.
They want flashy toys.
Yeah, but or they want the new mic stands
yeah,
that
yeah.
Don't fall apart. But no one's going to do a big Instagram
Marketing
post.
campaign about their mic stand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's pretty hard to satisfy everybody.
Yep. You just have to find that balance where
Yes.
it's, you need good, you buy the good quality gear. It's usually, you're going to usually satisfy the techs, but you're also going to satisfy your client because you're not going to have
Yes.
any problems with it. So,
Yeah.
We used to go through phases at staging, but it was often our push was to buy things that were client facing,
yep.
because they're the ones obviously touching it, feeling it, the lecterns, the microphone, it's in their face.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But they don't necessarily ever see the console,
Yeah.
so they don't. But the crew would be like, we need new audio desks. It's like, but the client never sees it. Does it work?
Yep. Yeah, a lot of the time, that stuff. I mean, I guess I've got a bit of a tech background, so I probably went, I got decent stuff most of the time. And I think a lot of us come from that. There are probably some owners out there who have never touched a piece of gear and they couldn't care less whether it's an Allen and Heath or a Roland or a Yamaha or it doesn't make any difference. But everybody, somebody's been in the industry sort of probably has their preferences, I guess. And you can see that in our business across the board because there's the same brands keep showing up
Yeah.
Whether the guys like using them or not, they're sort of a trusted brand that I'm sort of comfortable with. So
Yes.
And I think like reliability is one of the biggest things, isn't it? It's kind of like,
absolutely.
okay, this doesn't have the flashiest features, or you can't do it this way or that way, but it's like you put it on the job, it's going to do what it says. And I think a lot of techs appreciate that as well. Because there's nothing worse than being on a gig and, this fader's not working or it's frozen, and it's like, because you're there having to deal with it. So you just want something that's usually a solid brand name is because it is a solid bit of equipment that's going to be reliable and get the job done for years and years. And
usually once something starts to fail, you just got to get rid of it.
Because it's like, it might not happen again.
Yeah, now the guys all market, and everybody knows which one it is.
Yeah,
it's like nobody wants to take it out, so just get rid of it.
Yeah,
that's right. It's just a lemon now.
Yeah, so that's end of life. There you go. That's where that goes.
Yeah.
So.
And that's that difference between a hobby where it's like, I've got this, but it still does what I need to, or if something you put it out, it has to work, because
every feature has to work.
The gig that it fails on could be that big client that you were getting every, 4 big shows a year.
You could be that producer, it can be that show caller or that touring TD who's sitting at control with you. So it's all well and good that that channel 15 doesn't work, but you can't say that to these guys who are pros. And there's an expectation, and fair enough, they're paying, I don't know, whatever it is, $250 a day for that console, not to find out that half of it doesn't work.
Well, you never say to a client, we've knocked a bit off this because a few of the channels don't work.
Exactly.
It's interesting on channels that that used to happen a lot at Big AV, but oh my God, sorry.
Busy man.
I put it on silent always.
Things are too smart these days. It's like, you didn't really want it on silent because...
Right. So some jobs would start with a 16-channel desk, and there was X number of radio mics, but things grow. Clients add extra things, and then the console doesn't
suit,
doesn't go up with it accordingly.
Yep.
Or you've got to say to the customer, those 2 extra radio, that extra radio mic now, the bill's gone up by, why? It's like, because you now got a 32-channel desk, not a 16-channel desk. It's like, what happened? It's like, well, you just kind of crossed the threshold.
Yeah. We run into that in venues all the time, where they have one handheld included in the room, and then to make 2, it's a mixer and it's a guy to go in and it's set up.
But I just want one more mic.
Well, the MCG was to say you got one screen and projector. We got this in-house screen and projector, but when you wanted 2, you had to pay for. Well, isn't one for free? Yeah, but that's in the middle.
Yeah.
You now need 2 either side.
Yeah.
So it's just doubled.
It is what it is.
Yeah. It's not my fault.
Yep.
So I guess circling back to something you said before, like you made a decision early on, I'm not going to operate.
Yep.
I'm going to get someone in so that I can focus on everything else. Do you feel like that was a big part of allowing you the headspace and everything to really grow what you were doing?
Yeah, I think I could have gotten trapped in. I mean, there's a lot of guys around who operate their own shows. They're good at it. They're great technicians, great operators, have some gear, do bits and pieces, but to take it to the next level, to have it as a business.
Because that business will probably always stay that size.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. To get it to the next level, you're really going to have to step out of it. I mean, they talk about that, when you do sort of business coaching and things like that. They always talk about working on the business, not in it. And working as a technician operating a show is about it in the business as you can get. So.
Well, that's it. That's where I've found myself in the past, and even still at a lot of times now. And when you are caught in that, it's just like you've got no headspace or time to focus on anything. And then you get these down periods where it's like nothing's happening. It's like nothing's happening because you didn't do anything, because
back here
you were on the tools all day. So that's, it's interesting.
And look, there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of people who quite enjoy doing that, and they're happy to do that as that's their career. You don't have to have a business. Some people doesn't suit, but
it's that choice, like you're saying, at some point. And again, with the whole chicken or the egg, whether it's buying gear, hiring people, or stepping off the tools, I guess this is the that point where which way do you want to go? That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think you get to a point where if you want to build something that you can step away from, potentially sell, or at least retire from, or you have to have something that can run on its own momentum and run on its own steam, rather than you being the sole
such
drive.
an important part of it.
But as you say, that's not for everybody.
No, it doesn't suit everybody.
No.
So it just was what I chose to do in the end. So
And you've said this before about the teacher who becomes the principal, and they were a really great teacher, and now the school's lost their best teacher, and the teacher doesn't know how to run the school. Like,
that's right.
Sometimes
good analogy.
You got into it because you wanted to educate and all this kind of thing.
Sometimes though you have to, you can adapt. I mean, I ended up running big spreadsheets and doing big capex stuff that I had to learn and adapt to that. But those skills, when I left big AV and went to very small AV, I didn't run spreadsheets anymore because we didn't need to, because we didn't spend nearly the same amount of money, and I didn't need to keep it like that. But I kept all that knowledge, I guess, and all that thinking process and all that detail and all that rigor that we had to present about why we were buying something, who it was for, how it worked, and the return on the investment. And you sort of keep all that in your brain. I think I do wonder about people who have just come straight from from techs, crew, and then to basically become their own business, whether they even think like that.
I don't know. I mean, I was a tech. I did do sales in the previous business as well. Gave me a little bit of taste of that. And I guess everybody's different. I don't know whether somebody's, is that old? Are you born with it, or did you learn?
And it's nothing wrong. I just wonder whether they choose to buy a piece of gear. So classic example, obviously, is you've got a job. It's a multi-day job. The job's going to pay for some of that hire. It's the usual kind of like this. We could buy these 275s, and half of it will be paid for on the gig.
It's not half, but anyway.
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of things that they're not thinking about when they say that. They're not even aware of. I mean, there's no road case. There's no back rails. It's going to travel in a cardboard box. Is it going to even make it through that set up and pack down in one piece? Whereas big AV would just go, never going to do that. Like, we've got a list, and we're going to buy it in a timely fashion. We're going to order the road case. It's going to turn up. This is all going to happen.
Nothing goes out before it's in a road case.
Correct.
Inventory. Ready to go.
Whereas a small business can react, which is good because they can react on a dime, as they'd say. But is that a good decision, business?
Making impulse decisions like that sometimes. I try to avoid that wherever possible. I do. I mean, another rule of thumb, I guess, is that I generally spend in January and June. Unless something comes up but I do have to think about it outside of those periods. Just end of financial year, have a look where you're at. I always sit down at May with the accountant and go through everything and work out what's left and what we need to spend. And January is just a good time to go, okay, we've just come through that busy period. What have we spent money on? What didn't work? What do we need to improve on? And we just go through and make a few purchases then as well.
And you've got the time as well to really think through it rather than try to do it on the fly.
So I think when you do it on the fly, you tend to buy at retail. You tend to run off to JB and buy whatever you can. And so you don't necessarily get the model that matches the others. You don't necessarily get what you want. And you probably paid, possibly. I mean, maybe you paid a good price. I don't know.
I think from the small business mindset as well, you think very short term. Like if you've got a busy month and you think, but I could do that and I could do that job. And then you're looking at the end of what you're going to get at the end of the month. Whereas by getting other people in to do X, Y, and Z, at the end of that month, you're going to make less money. But then the idea is you've got to look beyond that, right? I guess. And that's the hard thing and the big step that you've got to do.
And it was easy to do back in, I was in my mid-20s at the time, so didn't need a lot of money. So sort of went, just, keep reinvesting it back into the business. And
but you're not even thinking about the fact you got this big BAS bill coming.
No, that's not.
You find that out pretty quick.
But when you first start, you think, I've got all this money, or this job will pay for.
That's right.
But I've heard that way too many times in my life. This job will pay for half of it.
Step back, hold on.
Slow down.
Evaluate this. We had it maybe a month ago. The same thing. One of the guys came to me and said, we need this extra 75-inch. It was literally that. And I'm like, hold on, let's step back and have a look, and had a look at things. And it turned out that we actually did need to get more. We were probably short of what we should have been, and which was a good opportunity to look at that.
That's right.
But I bought two. I made sure we got cases. It's got to be done properly. So.
Because otherwise you're sort of potentially spending good money after bad. So. But that's when you're small, but if you've only ever come from small, maybe that's your whole way of operating. It's not about right or wrong or good or bad. It's just different. But I can imagine you end up with a higgledy-piggledy different array.
Yeah, and
of
that's
gear.
one thing I couldn't stand was just this sort of mix match of gear and stuff.
Yeah.
So that was one of the nice things, I guess, about starting Gold Coast and Sydney
Yeah.
sort of halfway through this journey, like 12, 13 years ago when I did those two
Yeah.
locations, was to be able to go, okay, everything from scratch.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're going to get 3 of these and 5 of these and 2 of these, and everything matches.
Yes.
It's all cased properly. And
Yeah.
because those early days, as much as I would like to think we're, the way they are now, it wasn't like that. It was a lot more reactive and
Yeah.
get a few bits here and a few bits there, and
But you learn as you go.
learn as you go.
But it is good when you had to have an opportunity to do a reset.
When you can do a reset and
Yeah.
repurchase, that sort of was a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
And you wish you could do it back then, but it worked out the way it did.
Well, the reason you can do it then is because you learn.
I went through all of that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Yep.
makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Indeed.
Yep.
And it's the same with vehicles, buildings, I guess.
Yeah.
The whole.
Yeah. you
And that's
could do
hard because it's not a
anything.
direct return that you
No.
can look at, right? It's
Well, you want to talk
mean-
about TVs? I'll give you a good one. Client wanted, I can't remember what year it was, 12, 13, wanted two 85s. They were quite expensive still
Yeah,
at that point.
I imagine.
They were a good client, didn't want to lose them. So I was like, okay, well, I think we can make this work. We looked at the price of those and obviously the casing and all that stuff. So we bought 285s. In fact, I think you worked with them.
Oh, I think I do remember that one.
Talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
So we bought these 285s, cased them. They didn't go in the van.
They didn't fit in the.
Didn't
No.
think about the bloody
No.
case getting in the van. So I'm like, okay,
Yep.
so now I got to buy. That's a $60,000 van.
Yes. Yes. Well, and you see this
So-
now with these guys that are all jumped into LED screen, which is an episode we've got coming up
Yeah.
actually about the rise of LED. But
Yep.
the implications of LED, and I know companies that have now had to go out and buy obviously 12-ton trucks and
Yep.
because it's enormous.
But it's not like it's an easy thing to miss. Like
Sounds easy.
Yeah.
I've actually ran into the client on a plane, and I saw him coming and said hello, and he said, "Oh, you probably had a good return on those TVs by now." I said, "Funny story."
Yeah, that's right. Still paying
And he
for them.
couldn't believe that I had to buy a new van just to be able to transport them. So,
yeah.
there's a good example of learning the hard way. But it was one again. It ended up being used a lot because then it
Yep.
was like, oh, hold on, we don't have to take 2 vans to this gig anymore. We've
Yeah,
got a big
yes.
van that we can take
Yeah.
one. So we're actually more efficient for some of these other shows.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was probably a good.
Yeah, so you might have hired a 3-ton truck every once in a while.
Yeah, we were doing that. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So it just saved us doing that. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, but
But it wasn't what I wanted to do at the time.
no. So that's right. The implications, but it's all well and good
Yeah.
for people to go. Yeah, half of it will be paid for.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But no one ever comes to you and said all these flip charts will be paid for.
Nobody talks about flip
No.
charts. Still.
Do you still get flip charts out? Is it a
Still
thing?
are a lot of flip charts.
Really? Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, they're
So
still around.
They're still around. Still
Yeah.
go out a fair bit. So.
Yeah. And lecterns. I love a lectern.
Yep, lecterns are pretty popular still.
Yeah, they're a good return.
Yep.
I mean, they're not cheap, but they do.
No, but most of ours are in venues and stay there, which
Yeah.
means
Oh,
they
yeah,
just
yeah.
last forever.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
they're good.
Yeah.
Just replace the mics every few years and you're okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's right.
Yep.
Indeed.
One question, it's a bit off topic, but I think you touched on it a bit earlier about, can't remember exactly, but it was about business advice and advice from other people running business. Like how much
Yep.
do you invest in that sort of learning from others?
Yeah. So prior to opening Gold Coast in Sydney, I did. I went with this guy named John Asraf in the US. He was on that movie The Secret.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Back in the day, he had what's it called? It was a mastermind escape velocity mastermind course or something that I did.
Yeah.
So we went over to the US a couple times a year, met up with everybody. And I still actually have some really good contacts that I keep in touch with from that. There were a few Australians that did that. And it was just it was a really good opportunity to sort of talk to somebody who was completely out of the business, who were just used to growing businesses.
Okay, so it was more general.
It was very general, but that was a good thing rather than sitting down with an AV person and going,
Yeah.
oh, what do I want to do? Oh, you want to buy more gear?
Yeah.
This guy talked about marketing and sales and branding and things like that. So, we did a lot of branding stuff back probably just before that, and then we did some stuff around our sort of slogan back then, and represented ourselves, I guess, as a sort of a bit more of a player in the industry, to be able to win some of the contracts that we've won. In Gold Coast and Sydney in particular. So it sort of was a good sort of stepping stone to push us to the next level. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but it might have been a $20,000 investment or something like that, which was a lot of money.
Yeah, definitely.
Plus the airfares and all that stuff. But there's no question that it more than paid for itself. So I'm a big believer in paying for that sort of education. Dino and I have done some coaching sessions together as well. And he's the same. He gets a lot out of them when we do that.
It can be that hard thing to try to justify sometimes. Think, oh, well, because you buy a piece of gear, you're getting something. You're getting a van, you get to drive it around. But it can sometimes be a bit harder to say, I'm going to invest $20,000 in this.
Yeah, for sure.
But it can be. And that's why it's good to hear that it can be beneficial.
And I like going to outside the industry because I find that they just have a different perspective and they don't really care about the gear and
it's just
the
business
events and all that sort of stuff. So I actually went to one in I think it was about 2003, 4. A guy named Casey Golan who he actually sat down and he said to me, he goes, "This is a no-brainer for you because the amount that I'm charging, I'm going to get you back in the first month." And I'm like, "No, you can't do that."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Put your prices up 10%." And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Just put them up."
Yeah.
I did. Nobody questioned.
Yeah.
I was too cheap when I first entered the business.
Yeah.
I wanted to please everybody.
Yeah.
I didn't want to charge too much. And and I wasn't at market value. And I was just way too low. And he's right. I just got his fees back instantly. So and look, that doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work across the board. But I think that they have a good perspective on business generally. If you pick a good one, I think you got to interview them. You got to click with them. I sat down with a few before I chose the people that I've sort of gone to over the years.
Yeah, cool. No, that's good advice.
Do the venues, you're predominantly a venue-based business,
Yep.
They don't really care too much about the gear, do they?
No, as long as it works.
As long as it works, exactly. As long as it works.
They don't really care too much. You very, very rarely get asked by a venue what type of radio mic do you use or what.
I mean, there's an expectation that it absolutely works.
I mean, we don't list it on our website or on our price lists or anything like that. It's a Shure, it's a Sennheiser, it's a Roland or whatever. So I really don't think that they care that much. For them, venues typically have been fairly price conscious. Then they're also just want to make sure it works.
I think, and it's probably, they're just going to assume that it works.
Well, that should be a given.
And if it doesn't, then there's a problem, I guess.
I sat down with the GM just a couple of weeks ago, and I don't think he assumes it works. He
really? Okay.
absolutely grilled us over service and reliability and things like that because he's been
burned in the past,
and doesn't know why we will be any different than
no, that's fair enough.
So I don't think they can assume that it does work.
Well, there are plenty of times when it doesn't, I guess.
And it's how you recover from that. So that's what he wanted to hear. He didn't say it, but that's what he wanted to hear was, I have to say, when we got this kind of stock and backup, we're this far from the warehouse, it's, I'm going to still jump in a van and deliver equipment if I have to these days.
He wants to know that you've thought about it.
So if this happens, these are the triggers and we can resolve it this way. So, because you can't guarantee that piece of equipment's always going to work.
Yeah, true.
No. But is there a perception then that things are out of date or need to be turned over?
Yeah, there's certainly sitting in with venues that we're pitching for. There's often, the projectors look horrible, and I mean, you were talking about client-facing equipment, projectors. It's the number one thing. They turn on a projector, it's slightly blurry, or it's going a little green, or it's, the corners are fading, whatever it is. So they can see that if you've run a projector that long, then
they're tangible. You can see it.
That's and that's a big one. So that's probably the number one thing from venues.
I mean, that's probably usually the first thing that any AV provider would come in and say, we're going to
that's swap all those out straight away. Absolutely.
I mean, obviously there's new tech coming out all the time, laser, resolution issues, 4K, whatever. But
Yep.
But the things that don't really change,
screens, speakers. I mean, radio mics, if they didn't keep changing the frequencies on us.
Yeah, that's great, isn't it?
Been fairly stable for a while, which is good.
So, knock on wood. So, Yep.
Excellent. And so I guess to sort of wrap things up, your kind of general rules of thumb, how, what's your take, I suppose, on, how, on average, how many hires do you think you need to, what do you think?
I still like to see that 10.
It's a big number, though.
I know.
10 times.
I know. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. But,
I think it's more probably 20 times.
It's probably more 20 for a lot of the stuff we're buying these days. Yeah. Which is still fine. Like, we're still pretty high volume in our sort of area that we work in. So that's okay.
Yeah.
We're getting that back reasonably quickly. Obviously, getting it back's one thing, and then you got the maintenance of it and all of the rest of it.
Well, that's right.
Out of those costs, out of those revenues. So
because that's you often crew will say that thing would have paid for itself 100 times. It's like but
you don't see the whole picture.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
how many times have we repaired it? How many,
So probably rule of thumb around that 20. Like I said, that rule of thumb of if I'm hiring it once a month, I probably need to look at it fairly seriously. With crew, it's that sort of getting to that spending 150% of a full-time wage on subcontractors. You need to look at it.
Yeah.
Those are probably a few rules of thumb that I follow. And it may not work for everybody's business.
No.
That's the other thing.
No.
It may not work in an Encore or in a, or in your business. It might be slightly different. But certainly for our level of business, that sort of works.
Yeah. And I think you were saying before, if you don't have to hire anything or anybody, you've got too much stuff.
Way too much.
Yeah. That's right. Exactly. But as I say, if you're hiring it every day, all day, unless that's your business model, like you're a technical producer, and you just want to keep it light, like you can take it in an aeroplane, and the rest of it you're going to hire. Well, obviously your metrics are going to be completely different.
Correct.
But if you've got a little warehouse and a van,
those are probably some pretty good rules of thumb.
Yeah. Nice.
Good.
Oh, good. That was a great chat. Like I've learned a lot already. Like I'm just always, whenever someone comes on, just trying to think, well, what do I want to know? And so it was really good to go over all of that.
Good.
Excellent. Well, thanks for coming on down.
And
being on Gafferpedia.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
And we do have at least a couple of people that listen from Canada, so hopefully enjoy.
There you go.
Hearing
sort of quasi-Canadian sounding.
You're still
all my Canadian friends think I sound Australian now, so
okay.
I think I've lost it. So
no, you can still
I don't know what I sound like. My kids think I'm just messed up.
Well, on that bombshell,
we
will say thanks for coming, and we'll talk to you all next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Gafferpedia is brought to you by TechBox, Hippo Event Technology, AV Hire, and Cardigan Creative. Catch you on the next episode.